Well, I think people have brought into my message because I look like Brad Pitt and sound like Boy George. Yeah, trade unionists get called quite a lot. We get called militant extremists, we get called barons. We're not barons. I don't push people around. I haven't got a strategy board, and my members certainly aren't pawns. I can be got rid of by my members, unlike Rupert Murdoch. Nobody can get rid of him. We've got newspapers and media outlets owned by oligarchs who are telling working class people like myself and other trade union leaders that we're some kind of elite aristocracy, trade union barons. It's just absolute nonsense. And some of these media people, they seem surprised that working class people with accents can articulate a case on behalf of other people and have got ideas about the economy, about the way politics work. They find that shocking, but if they come into mess rooms on the railway or go down their local pub or go to their church or mosque, they'll find millions of articulate working class people. But the fact is, we don't get a chance to express ourselves. And my attitude is, I'll give you a straight answer to a straight question, but if you give me a load of nonsense, I'm just going to bat that over the boundary and give it the treatment it deserves.
Let me show you what I believe is your Facebook page. I want you to confirm or deny if this is your Facebook page.
Is that the level your journalism's at these days?
I simply asked you if that was you.
What will they do if agency workers try to cross those picket lines?
Well, we will picket them. What do you think we'll do? We run a picket line and we'll ask them not to go to work. Do you not know how a picket line works?
What do they do anyway?
Well, you can see what picketing involves. I can't believe this line of questioning.
Are you or are you not a Marxist?
Richard, you do come up with the most remarkable twaddle sometimes, I've got to say.
He says that you're militant, that you're extreme left, and he went on to say that you're not normal.
Well, it's ironic to be called not normal by the Conservative Party, who are taking themselves into the realms of the extreme right at the moment. The government intends to bring forward new laws. We've heard a bit about it recently, agency workers and other measures. But that's not the end of it. We've heard Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak both saying they're going to bring in the most extreme anti-trade union laws to make it almost impossible to take legal and effective industrial action. We've also heard about the police laws that they brought in under Mrs. Patel to stop even demonstrations and any expression of dissent. If you take those two measures together, trying to suppress the right to protest, also trying to stop us expressing ourselves as workers in the workplace, there's a real danger that this government and the future leaders of the Tory party are taking a turn to the extreme right. And if we're not careful, decades and centuries of progress could be ripped off us in a matter of months. Keir Starmer has responded to these strikes through silence generally. Nobody knows what he actually identifies with. And I'll be frank with everybody, I want Labour to win the next election. It's in the interest of our people that we replace this government with an alternative government. But what I think might happen is that he is so bland and so anonymous that he won't win that election. So he's really got to find a way to identify with the struggles that are going on. And sacking a front bencher such as Sam Tarry, who comes from the trade union movement, whose only guilt is he stood by me and my members on a picket line, is the wrong direction for any Labour Party regime to go in.
I think it's a fundamental mistake to ban Labour MPs from being on picket lines. It shouldn't happen, never happened. It's caused a complete car crash of a week when we should have been talking about what we're going to do to raise wages for the British people.
The public has given us a really great response. Some of these pickets have turned into spontaneous demonstrations. We've had outbursts of support in Glasgow, Liverpool, Birmingham, South Wales, all over the place. And not just from traditional trade unionists, but from the general public, those that are not involved usually in campaigns. And I think that's because they recognise that what's happening to us, or could happen to us if we don't get a deal, has already happened to them. We've seen what's happening in the aviation sector, where people have been ripped off. We've seen in the NHS, and we've seen the barristers out on strike lately. Everybody feels they're being ripped off. So I think that's why it's resonating and people want to get behind us. I get stopped in the street because my profile's gone up. That's unusual for somebody that looks like me, but people are coming up to me on the bus, on the tube, saying, keep going. But our members are getting it as well. People are giving them the thumbs up in their everyday jobs, and even the passengers on train, when we go back to work, are wishing us well. And I don't think the Tories were expecting this. I don't think the bosses were expecting it.
It's tough times for the taxi drivers, and it's even tougher times now that these rail strikes are going to put a squeeze on your trade.
Yeah, first and foremost, I want to say that the men and women of the trade unions are totally 100% back them. They have a right to stand up for the working rights. And it's unfortunate that we don't have more unions that are strong enough to stand up for that.
Down the years, the people in power, the ruling class, the powers that be, the media, have always sought to divide working people. Back in the day, it used to be Catholic against Protestant, Scottish against English, black against white. That's all nonsense. Working class people have got to stick together in every community, respecting our diversity, respecting our differences, but also building maximum unity. And division is fatal for working class people. We cannot allow that to happen. All workers are one, and that's the attitude we've got to take forward, mobilising our people together, all workers of every identity in one mass movement. The cost of living crisis is one of the most significant things we've had. By the end of the year, we could have ordinary working class families paying £500 a month for energy bills. That is phenomenal, and it's unforgivable that a government could let that happen while these companies, BP, Shell, the distribution companies, the privatised gas companies, are making phenomenal profits, 37 billion, while working people, and even people on reasonable salaries, are starting to struggle just to get by week. If that profit was turned into a progressive view, the provision of services was in order so that people could enjoy their lives and be balanced in favour of the ecology, the environment, we'd have a much better system. So I think the very idea of public ownership itself, ownership by the people and for the people, is an idea that trade unionists and the labour movement have got to put forward. We've got a rail system that's completely confused in this country. We've got a mixture of owners of the train operating companies. The majority of those owners are actually European states, so the French, Dutch railways, Spanish and German. They take the profits and go and subsidise the railways in Europe. But where they are true private sector operators such as First Group, Go Ahead and others, last year they took £500 million out of the railway from subsidy from the government. At the same time they put the fares up, and at the same time they're saying to railway workers, you can't have a pay rise for 2 or 3 years and you may lose your job and you've got to chop up all your conditions. If we had a public sector railway that was owned by the people, we could concentrate on making the railway the centrepiece of an integrated transport policy that links up the bus services, the trams, the ferries we've got around our coasts, could all be linked up in a low-cost, carbon-free transport system. We could have a great vision for the future if the railway and public transport was in public ownership that was at the service of the people and at the service of our environment, which we all know we need to change as an emergency item. So that being in public hands, I think, is a fundamental of a progressive society. Transport for the people, not for profit. What we've got to remember is that trade unions exist in every society. They're almost an organic development. And if you look at where we've progressed from, we had a world where we were virtually serfs. We've developed an idea where we have regulations at work, so health and safety regimes itself were brought in through trade union campaigning. The Factories Act, the ending of children's exploitation and the ending of many deaths at work. Thousands of people used to be killed in Britain at work every year. We've got the very idea of the weekend is a trade union idea. Public holidays, sick pay, holiday pay itself, pensions, statutory education for our children, and then the jewel in the crown, of course, is the National Health Service. So all of that stuff stems from the trade union movement, and we can't afford to lose it as working class people. People need to join a union because it's your hope and it's your strength. If you're in a union, you're not isolated. If you're on your own, they pick you off. Like the idea that if you sing on your own, you're one voice. If you sing in a choir, it's a powerful voice. Being able to have the confidence to turn to your workmates and say, we've got an idea, let's try and push for it. And we need to get that into a national campaign stemming from every workplace to make sure that the unions themselves put their flag and their identity into working class communities, not just in the workplace, but in the working class housing estates and on the streets of Britain. The trade unions have got to show the unorganised how to organise. They've got to show the people that have given up that there is hope, that they can organise and build. At the minute, Starmer and the front bench of the Labour Party seem to be getting pulled to the right as the Tories get pulled to the right in this leadership campaign. That's a tug of war. Politics is always a tug of war. And the working people have got to be with the unions and with other activists and campaigners, no matter what their background or identity is, working together to pull that back to our side so that we've got a real community-based working class movement that stands up for our rights and our positions. And then the politicians will have to follow us if we get our act together. It's difficult for working class people to get their voices heard, to get trade union leaders heard, to get the expressions of solidarity that we want to hear. And channels like this, Double Down News, it's really important that you join us, that you become linked up, and that we have this ability to express ourselves. So join Double Down News on Patreon.